Kaiju Network presents TokuZone, where we have a very healthy obsession with Kaiju. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other
Jason, what's
co-host.
going on, everyone?
So, this particular episode, we are closing out Johnny Sokko and his flying robot. We are covering the final 3 episodes, and after that, we are doing our year-end spectacular. Traditionally, in the past, that particular podcast has been our longest, and initially it was sort of by design. This year, it's not going to be by design. It's just sort of whatever happens, happens. However, the year-end episode has consistently been a smorgasbord of kaiju-related topics, where either you, the listeners, if you bring up topics to us, we will cover and just have discussions over, or we come up with topics ourselves and we discuss them. So as of right now, we both of us are in the middle of putting notes together and topics and all that. We are working on that stuff. By the way, I apologize if my particular feed seems jittery. I am watching it here live on YouTube. It seems to be okay, but not as good as what we've had over recent weeks. So I apologize for that. Um, but we're closing out
Oh,
Johnny
yeah,
Sokko
definitely.
today, Jason. So not only are we covering the final 3 episodes, at the end of our discussion of these 3 episodes, we will just kind of give our overall thoughts on the series
Mhm.
as a whole. So if there's any housekeeping, Jason, let's do that before we dive into our discussion
Well,
of these
there's
final
always
three
going to be some
episodes.
housekeeping around here.
Well, minus that.
With that, just want to notify everyone about our streaming and podcast networks. As far as our audio podcast networks, you can find us over at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and TuneIn. And as far as streaming networks, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook Live, Periscope, and D Live. And you can also like and subscribe to us on these following social media networks. Just search for Kaiju Network. And we've got our own website over at daikaijunetwork.com, which we will hopefully be updating the main menu or the homepage for that pretty soon. Before, I would say, when we do the year end extravaganza show that we typically do. So, um, with that, do you have any particular Toku related news items in mind?
The only thing I have seen, and I don't know too much about it, and part of it is because I haven't had the time to look deeper into it. Um, I guess we're learning a little bit more about the characters for the upcoming anime miniseries or series. Was it? Is it a miniseries?
I don't know exactly. I
Is
haven't
that what
really
it is?
known much in that regard since we've covered it about a few or so episodes ago.
Yeah, and I heard, and excuse me, not heard, but saw something about 18 voices. To me, and again, I didn't dive too deep into this. To me, that almost means that we're having 18 characters. If indeed true, that's way too many
Oh,
characters,
yeah.
in my opinion. If that is true.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what they have in mind when it comes if there's going to be 18 characters, like a large cast. To me, it sort of reminds me of these movies like, I don't know, maybe Armageddon or something along that line where they have these big A-list, uh, you know, actors and actresses in that particular movie, or I think maybe Day After Tomorrow, whichever, where they have tons of these well-known actors and actresses, and it's just sort of hard to come up with their stories and possible back end, like backstory and everything. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go down. If it's going to be a mini series, if it's just going to be a regular series, I can at least see that working out at least. But yeah, but with that, I do want to discuss that we at least have another couple seconds worth of footage for the upcoming Godzilla vs Kong. If any of you have seen that brief 2 second footage
Yeah, oh yeah, that yep.
of the uh, fronts of both Godzilla and Kong as well. They're from this CCXP convention that's down in Brazil there, where Warner Brothers had this 6 hour plus long panel discussing about their upcoming movies for next year, as well as them planning on releasing all of these movies on the same day on HBO Max, as well as into theaters as well. There, so what are your thoughts? Because it seems like uh, Godzilla's design in that seems to at least not changed at all. But as far as Khan, in my opinion, it doesn't quite seem like he hasn't changed a whole lot, even though it's just maybe about a second worth of footage that we see him in that.
Yeah. The thing is that I mean, the only two real differences with Kong are that he's got sort of a quote unquote, and that he's significantly taller than he was with Skull Island. Uh, but I mean, that's not a huge deal. I love what what's going on here. I've actually grown more excited about um, this movie as we've gone along. I gosh, I don't know how many months ago it was now when they were talking about reshoots. Um, because there seemed to be this weird teeter-tottering information batch that was saying that new. Actually, it was a year ago when King of the Monsters came out. After King of the Monsters did okay, but didn't meet exactly studio expectations at the box its opening weekend or week, I should say. Um, they were Warner Brothers announced they were doing reshoots, and that sort of concerned me because it made me think, okay, King of the Monsters did okay, but didn't do as well as they had hoped, and as a result, they're like had some ideas, Godzilla versus Kong, and as a result, we got to sort of on a certain level rethink what we're doing here with this final movie, and it scared me because it made me realize sometimes, not always, but sometimes with reshoots, it means you're putting in the newer. Sometimes, again, not always. This can sort of screw up with the plot. It can make things jumbled if you don't have a good editing team on hand. It had for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
As time has progressed and we've come to this point in time, becoming more excited but more confident in that the final product we're going to get will actually be, at the very least, entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
I'm liking, by and large, what I've been seeing. And by the way, again, there's other big news. Warner Brothers is releasing all their 2021 titles on HBO Max. I intend on getting a subscription to that, not just because I want us to cover it here, on the podcast, but also I am a fan of Godzilla and I want to see that new movie. Plus, a number of their other films coming up this year as well. So you just want to say hi? Say hi. That's my son Lincoln there. So yeah, what I'm right now is good. However, I felt pretty good about going into a Godzilla movie. That was leading up to Shin Godzilla.
Yeah.
So you know, I I went into King of the Monsters feeling iffy on it, but excited, but didn't necessarily, was kind of meh on it in terms of the quality of getting. But yeah, the last time I really not just excited but confident that we were going to get something good was Shin Godzilla. So there's a part of me that's a bit. For the most part, long story short, I'm feeling pretty decent right now.
All right. So with that, just want to go over to this cam over here. There's at least a few decent chunk of Toku-related news here. As far the main one I just wanted to touch upon here is this Tokusatsu DNA Ultraman genealogy exhibition that will be held. I think sometime it says this month in Osaka. I'm not sure if it really says anything what time specifically this month, but apparently that it's going to be held in the Hiragata Park in Osaka, and it'll be open until uh, January 31st of next year. Even though it says 2020, that's just a little bit of a mistypo there. And it says that this same exhibition was previously held in Tokyo Dome back in October this year with a VR ticket available online. And this event features the visual effects used by Toho, the company that produced Godzilla, and that it features information about the history behind filming of the franchise, as well as many screen-used props on display, such as the 3 different types of masks used in the 1966 Ultraman original series there, which you can kind of see on that article there. So that's particularly it for this one here. It'd be sort of nice to go and see these kinds of exhibitions every year if we had the money, and of course with everything that's going on, if we're able to get back, traveling abroad sometime down the road here. But with that, I want to go on to the next news item here that Mega Corporation has released its first figure in the new Ultraman line. And we get at least quite a few screenshots here of the new Ultraman figure that's released by them. They're sort of like the company that makes these unique 1960s, 70s style figurines. And like with this one here, it seems like sort of one of those bendable or a little bit of one of those articulate figurines with cloth going over the exoskeleton or whatever it is underneath this, because you can kind of see a little bit close up here that the suit for Ultraman is just made out of fabric and everything. It's sort of just by looking at it, sort of reminds me of one of those Robot Chicken type of animatronics or figures that they particularly use for that. But it also sort of reminds me of the American version of Ultraman that came out in the early 1990s. There, just by looking at it. Let's see here. The figure actually stands 8 inches tall, which is a bit surprising, and it'll be available at Walmart during the holiday season. And the retail price for it is going to be $15. Let's see here. It doesn't really say when specifically, but on this last paragraph here, it's also working. So apparently they're going to be working on an Ultra 7 figure, which is planned to be released in early 2021 there. So
That's interesting. They haven't seen the numbers yet. That's when they're already doing a number.
So with that I'm not sure when this figure is going to be available. Uh, even though it says that they're going to have it at Walmart. I'm assuming that's available right now, so I would suggest taking a look online on the Walmart website, or if the nearby Walmart from you might have it, or maybe some comic book stores. So with that, just want to touch on at least a couple of actors that have sadly passed away, such as the Nebula Mask Machine Man's Osamu Sakuda. He passed away here just recently at the age of 62 here. He portrayed Ken Takase, the main character of the tokusatsu drama Nebula Mask Machine Man in 1984. Uh, he's done many voice acting and dub roles, such as portraying Shishinki in Inuyasha, Leon Vance in NCIS. So yeah, he passed away on the 4th of December here due to pancreatic cancer there. And of course, here's the response from his agency here. Sakuda was a warm person who didn't play favorites and was loved by many. He would be very happy if everyone could love on the many works he left behind. And lastly, here's another sadly passing away. Kinjo Mana, known for portraying Ui or Yui, and Kishiyu Sentai Ryu Solger passed away on the 1st of December there. Apparently, her agency announced her passing due to unspecified illness on December 5th via her official Twitter and blog there, which you can see right here. So yeah, that's a couple of unfortunate news items there. Otherwise, for those of you that live in Japan, I'm a bit jealous of you. If you definitely go and see this Tokusatsu DNA exhibit, and as well as far as the Mego Corporation Ultraman figure there, assuming it's available out in Walmart right now. So yeah, it's otherwise that's basically it of news items on my end.
All right. So with that, do we want to get into the meat and potatoes of
Yes,
the
let's
episode?
get done with this.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have anything else, so might as well get to it.
Oh.
Unless if you do.
No, I don't. All right, so let's enter the final 3 episodes of Johnny Sokko and his flying robot here. We're starting with episode 24. So here we go. I'm going to do the English title followed by the Japanese. And as always, this is what we've done since the end of August. We will just quickly give our opinions as far as what we think is the better title of each episode. So the English title, A Terrifying Bacteria. The Japanese title is Hydrozone, the Bacterial Germ. Excuse me, Jason.
I probably would go. Excuse me. I'd probably go with the English version because, in particular, what we see here isn't really much of a germ. It's just more of like this liquid pool, like red pool, or in some of the scenes it looks a bit chunky in a way. So I would say terrifying bacteria seems to fit it more, and plus with bacteria germ, it seems to contradict with one another in a way. I don't know if they essentially mean the same, but I'm just going to assume that bacteria and germ are sort of one and the same.
Both, in my opinion, close to being almost the same thing. But I slightly just go with the English title. It's a bit better.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, here's a quick plot summary of episode 24. Gargoyle, led by Hydra, unleash the liquid bacteriozone on a nuclear tanker, killing everyone aboard. Later, Unicorn's base is attacked by the bacteria and all appears doomed when Robo is destroyed. But wait, there's flying around, and the one that was destroyed was a duplicate. Iganog is unleashed, and Robo tosses the Kaiju, freezes Hydra, Professor Hydra, and he's defeated. So right out of the gate, I want to say this, because, well, this is some of the first shots we see of the episode when it begins, is that I think Hydrazona looks like either baked bean or of awful vomit as it crawls around.
It sort of looks like vomit to me in a way, just how it's presented in those first couple of minutes. But like I mentioned earlier, that there seems to be a couple, at least two iterations of this bacteria. One is just more of a smooth liquid version of it, and then the other one where we basically see the very first time it's more like this chunkified version of this goo or ooze or whatever it is.
Yeah, I have written in my notes that the consistency of this thing always seems to change, and I don't think that there's necessarily, because as we've talked about many times before, last almost 4 months, is that there is nothing really brilliant, I'm sorry, about this series.
No.
So I think the inconsistencies are the result of just being unable to be consistent on the part of the product. So, whoopsies, I think. But at the same time, what I noticed is that you find the chunkier version. This just sounds awful. When it's kind of like running down walls, more or less. There are a couple exceptions in the episode where this isn't true, but moments where it's supposed to run down a wall or something, it tends to be chunkier. But on level surfaces, that's when it tends to be more of a liquid. And I think part of that is just because you can't, it's chunkier, and you're the production team off camera, like step to try to get it to go in a certain direction. Trying to so awful the stuff to move as easily in specified direction. Hence the more liquid form in certain shots. I think they came in wanting it to be chunkier, but they realized obviously quickly that when you're doing some of those sewers with a couple of those unicorn agents, you obviously your stuff to move as easily. So then they opted to just have, I don't know, red colored water, or something like that,
Yeah, it's, to me, when they do something like that, it just feels inconsistent. I think that's just really the occurring theme that we obviously see in this series as we've been talking about it for the last few or so months here, that there is quite a bit of inconsistencies here and there. And in that regard, I think just with how this substance was made, I know it's not really like water in a way, because you can at least see a few times where there's some resistance to it, unlike with water, it just goes everywhere in an instant. Where this one, it at least has some sort of resistance as far as the speed and everything. And with that being said, to me, there should have at least been some sort of consensus as to how this stuff was made and how it should have been executed in this episode here. Like, is it going to be the chunkier version of it, or is it going to be the more smooth, more kind of a liquid version of it, but at least have some resistance or at least some slowness into how it's being used? Maybe like sort of the blob in a way, but more of a liquefied version of it. But in that regard, even with some of the scenes where it climbs up walls and everything and all that, to me, it should have been more consistent.
Yeah, I'm not too terribly concerned about the consistency, other than, yeah, technically it is an issue, but it's not something that for me is going to make or break the episode or the story itself. So it is something that should have been addressed. But I understand in the directions that they had to go for various shots. By the way, and I know I've said this a lot throughout the course of this retrospective, another general I have totally forgotten about, Professor Hydra. This guy, is some, despite the fact he has a semi-unique look to him, is very forgettable.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a one-off. He's one of those occasional one-off gargoyle generals. And I realized there's a reason why I totally forgot
Same here.
about him. It's not just because Fangar or Botanist where his appearance is incredibly unique. There is some uniqueness to it, but the reason why he, and I'm just going to say it, and this is kind of showing my hand a little bit, why this episode is also forgettable. He's written, and the fact that he and this story are written in such a way in which not a whole lot of excitement takes place. It is a pretty, for the first time since we've covered, this series, this is an episode that I thought was very drawn out. It felt like it, anyways. Especially after the initial opening involving Hydrazona. And we get to a point to where unicorns go to the launch site where this nuclear tanker is about to take off and have its first mission or first flight. That whole sequence was, there literally was nothing happening. Members of the unicorn continuously communicating with one another over walkie-talkies or other various forms of electronic communications. I couldn't believe it, because we've run into a few episodes occasionally where we're like, this is dull, not much is happening. There's a decent sequence where it felt like it was really long, it was dull, nothing really took place. And I really realized in that moment what I thought about this episode, regardless of what took place. Unless the final battle was to be something bigger than I had thought it might be, and as a final battle that was decent, but it wasn't enough to make up for this middle section of the episode. And
well, I was just gonna say, yeah, I just totally forgot about this Professor Hydra in this episode, even though that these final three, or at least this final disc that we've been getting into here the last couple episodes here, that this, it's like I just seen these just maybe around this time last year, so it should have been, these should have been fresh in my mind, so to speak. But this episode, to me, like the final three, out of these three, this was the one that I basically forgot about. It's like I completely forgot about this dude here. But of course, in the next episode, when we get around to it, at least I knew how that one went down, because at least that one was, more memorable compared to this one. Like I completely forgot that this whole bacteria thing came into play, and is obviously the professor here, and at least I might have remembered one time when it came to the whole melting part of this decoy giant robo that we get here. But to me, I sort of forgot though that it was a decoy until the real one flew in from the sky there. And I was like, oh shit. But obviously, we're 2 episodes down, or 2 episodes to go, so it's like, yeah, it's somewhere. But yeah, this episode is just sort of doesn't really go much anywhere. There's just not really much substance in here. I think it's just trying to fill up some space. I mean, I'm sorry, whoever wrote this, but yeah, it's just,
no, don't be sorry.
yeah, it's just, I don't know. It just seems like that they didn't quite know what they really want to do with this episode.
It's not complete mess of an episode. First of all, didn't Iganog die in its initial? I thought it might have.
I think so.
So there, if that is true, we have a problem already. Because it's bad.
Since we've gotten other monsters that came back from the dead, so it's so I'm just gonna say time out. You're thinking way too much into this.
Well, that's the problem with this series, as we've talked about before.
Yeah.
I you know what? I'm gonna sort of skip over some of the point written down, because both you and I at this point have basically said that this is an episode that is kind of a big mess. But I want to point out just some things to sort of poke fun at this episode, because I think it deserves it. I thought it was fun seeing Johnny attempt to shoot the Hydrazona. And then a few seconds later, members of Gargoyle also laughed at them for shooting at Hydrazona. I just was like,
it was the same for the other unicorn members that literally did the same when they were in that area where Giant Robo was. And then also when those the 2 guards that were out in the back, and then no, they were looking for both Johnny and Jerry, who were down the sewer, and the rest, including Chief Azuma. Like, they went down to that sewer, and in that one scene where the last 2 guys were going down, like just adjacent, just a little over to the left, is this red pool of the bacteria. It's like, did you guys not see that?
I thought thing, but I didn't bother writing it down because I thought, what
I
the
didn't write
hell?
it down
I mean,
either, but that's just something
no.
that, to me at least, that's something that's like, that should have been addressed right there.
Yeah. Didn't Robo look more blue to you in these final 3 episodes? I really thought the came off more blue than what he's ever been, or it, I should say.
Maybe just in this episode, but it seemed like at least in the last episode he seemed to be that gray color. But in that one scene where they had this probably this mannequin version of giant robo that they had there when the building was dissolved by this bacteria, you can obviously see it's not the suit version of giant robo there. It's just more like this mannequin-esque version of robo there. And it seemed to me in that scene, he seemed more silverish rather than blue or that gray or light gray color. And it also seemed to me he had like this big fat cheeks too, like this.
I guess I missed that. I didn't think he came.
It sort of did to me.
Hold on here. Let me see my notes here. There was something else I wanted to bring up here that I thought, yeah, and I kind of figured this was going to happen, but at the same time, I'm totally forgotten about this particular episode. And I understand this is a kid's show, so this sort of stuff is going to get pulled frequently. Is when the hydrozone began to dissolve. Myself, that is not the real Robo, and sure, shooting the real one, of course, was flying around, and I just groaned because there was no real set for that, and it felt cheap and contrived.
I would like to know
for that to happen.
I would like to know, like within the last few or so hours of, or several hours, when they get the message from Professor Hydra of them going to be attacking HQ there, that I'd like to know how they managed to get all this material or tin, which they described that they built this decoy giant robo out of, and then like how they get all this time and resources. Yes, I know. Just let me finish. To build this thing as well as paint it out in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't asking those questions because, first and foremost, this is a kid show, and this is a very general, wacky show. And one of the reasons why I love it, despite the fact that I have criticized it semi-regularly during the course of this retrospective, that doesn't mean that I hate it. I'm just saying that that it provides problems where my suspension of disbelief it exceeds that, and I'm able to go along with quite a lot up to a point, and then once you hit a particular hurdle, begins to get too much. And we've talked about that numerous times over the course of this series. And that was, besides the middle part of the episode where very little happens, this moment where supposedly Robo dissolves was the moment in which a pile of garbage in front of you that was already lit on fire, due to the middle section of the episode being completely dull. And then after that garbage got burnt up and the fire went away, someone decided to come in, pour kerosene on that same pile, and it just became this thing that was a flaming mess. And I just sort of, I have enough of it by that where when that sequence took place, I was beyond done at that point. I thought it was neat that they actually attacked Unicorn, and by and large, the base is gone.
I would say a good portion of it.
At the same time, yeah, but by and large, the way the whole Robo deal was handled was coming once it started taking place. It was done because I knew I'm going that up here. And again, it's a kid show, but I've just sort of had enough of it at this point. And it just, that was enough for me.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else at this point for this episode here. Yeah, I'm just gonna go in my final thoughts on this. Originally, I had it just barely above average, but I think I'm gonna change it for this here. Now that I think about it more, yeah, it's the episode. Just, I don't know. It just seems to be not really there at all. There's just really no substance to go off of to make it a really good episode, as well as make it memorable in a way. Especially with Professor Hydra, he's just again one of the few one and done generals in the Gargoyle gang, which to me I completely forgot about, even though it's been just a little over a year since I've last seen this last disc of episodes here. And yeah, it's just one of the few episodes I totally forgot about, and even what this bacteria even existed. Yeah, it's just one of those episodes that is just forgettable and poorly executed. I'm sorry for whoever written this episode. Yeah, it's just not a really good one. I just go with a 3 out of 10 on this one.
So isn't Hydrazona still loose though? Because I didn't see any sort of
with that whole sparks that Giant Robo did, or as they call it, the heat shower. That's what killed it. That's what killed it off, and then that's when Iganog comes into play.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah.
All right.
So yeah, basically, it wasn't really an episode about the bacteria at all. In the end.
Yeah. Really wasn't about anything. I had totally forgotten about this episode. I know I've talked about how many of the generals I'd forgotten over the course of this retrospective, but this one was totally forgettable. And I understand it's pretty flat with a fairly dull gargoyle general, and Iganaga's appearance is really out of nowhere. With Hydrazona still on the loose, it's not entirely a happy ending. There's quite a bit of talking back and forth with the Unicorn members during the tanker launch with little happening. It's a weak episode that you'd be okay to see. And you thought your rating was low. Here's my rating.
Jeez.
1 out of 10. That's the lowest I've given to any episode in this
I thought you had
series.
one that was 0 out of 10.
No. I think the lowest ones I had up to this point were 2.
Like, I also could have sworn that you had a 1, but
episode 25. What?
Never mind.
Want to start something? Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Go, bitch.
Episode 25. Episode 25. The English title is Draculon. Creature of the Japanese title is the Space Vampire. Which title do you think is better, or do you prefer the most?
I couldn't quite hear the Japanese one because your audio got gobbled there.
The Japanese title is the Space Vampire.
Space Vampire is too generic for me. I think the English one sounds much better in that regard. Plus, we get the name of the dude who is basically like a vampire, but much different compared to a lot of the other vampires that we see, and even some of the villagers that we see that turn into vampires. And yeah, it's to me the English version is much better in my opinion.
I agree. The Japanese title, and again, it could be because the dubbing sometimes is different. With what is implied and what is even said over the course of the episode, nothing is mentioned that this Draculon is from space. It maybe on a small level could be implied because he says at one point, I think he's a member of the Gargoyle Gang. Although even then, that's not necessarily clear, because as we've gotten into this half of the series, Emperor Guillotine, by and large, has been fairly a whole lot of him. And this is
I can tell you
another episode in which Guillotine.
I can tell you one person who has been very absent ever since.
I can tell you 3. And I bet I know what you were going to come up with.
Well, that'd probably be a given.
I got Fangar and Red Cobra.
Well, I've got Harlequin.
I've got Harlequin, Fangar, and Red Cobra. But we'll talk about that in a bit. Yep. But okay, here we go with a quick plot summary of episode 25. A small village is discovered to have most of its people dead. However, it's realized they were turned into vampires by Draculon. Jerry and Johnny confront Draculon until they need the assistance of Robo. Draculon enlarges himself to battle Robo. Manifests a burning cross. Yes, somehow it has to be a burning cross. And it destroys. I love Draculon. I love the design of this character. This is a character I do remember seeing. I also like the dub. Yeah, it is the very stereo dub of what many people think Dracula sounds like. It's the boo blah, I want your blood type of voice. Thing. I like it, but at the same time, I hate it because it's sort of off in some ways too.
Yeah, but I can at least understand why the Japanese title for this episode was called the Space Vampire. simply because of the appearance of Draculon in this, because he doesn't have
Mhm.
that ordinary appearance of any Dracula or vampire with, just looking like a regular human being except for the fangs. But all the other villagers that have turned into vampires don't look like that. They just look like your ordinary vampire. Maybe the only difference is the color of the skin being like this greenish, grayish type of color.
Yeah. The thing is, though, he, at least in the dub, says he is Dracula because at one point, and I wrote it down here, he calls himself, embrace yourself for this because this is a weird way of phrasing it, but is actually said in the dub, anyways. Dracula says, I am the Dracula of the vampires of Gargoyle. That's what he says.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised one
So
bit.
my first question after that was said was, so is he actually Draculon or is he technically Dracula?
That's just too much.
Someone screwed up somewhere. Well, I think it's a perfectly legitimate question to ask. I just thought it was weird. By the way, and I'm just going to say this right now, despite the fact that I love Draculon, I love how he looks, I love the weird dubber that does the voice. This episode miffed me as well. And, logic and reason are out the window when it comes to this sort of thing. But this goes for Draculon's assistant, it goes for him, and it goes for all those people that he turned into vampires in this small village. How are they able to tolerate sunlight? No, 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 no. I'm not letting this one go. Because in vampire lore, we know vampires stop that. Cannot tolerate down. So I have a real problem with that. That is one of those moments where it so far hurdles my suspension of disbelief that I have real issue with that. And then there's another one. Stop. I'm doing a different point. You stop. My other point, didn't you notice that the people in the village who were turned into vampires actually behaved more like zombies and vampires?
In the behavior, yes, as I can see that. Um, yeah, that is pretty interesting in a way. It's sort of like this zombie vampire-ish type of behavior, even though like they'll have the sort of the similar appearances of a vampire or traits as far as the fangs and stuff, but as far as like the zombie part goes, yeah, maybe with the like the green grayish uh, paint on their skin, and then even when they're like getting up from the ground or whatever, yeah, that sort of has that uh, familiar trait of a zombie in a way where if you're turned into a vampire, like some of the movies that we've seen, like a lot of these classic films, uh, most of the people that turn into vampires don't really behave that way. Although when it comes to the his assistant or that gal there, she doesn't really behave that way. And then here we go again. I think it's just more of that inconsistency that we typically sort of call out in this entire show that we've been discussing about the last few months. So, so yeah, you can definitely see that trait of a zombie in a way when it comes to these villagers in that regard.
Yeah, again, like you said, and at one point when Jerry and Johnny come into the village to investigate, she says, "We need to talk to my father," and it's never really clear as to whether or not Draculon is indeed her father. I think I've always assumed she was playing Jerry and Johnny.
That's 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 my
Um,
guess. Just the way how she acted
that's
the first time.
yeah, but regardless of where she is his daughter or not, the fact that the people do behave more like zombies, they're slow and they moan and they groan and they slowly kind of reach out to people and all that. That is very zombie like,
Mm-hmm.
not vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back, thing that's not a vampire. The fact that now everybody who is a vampire in this episode is immune to sunlight. But however, during the final battle with Draculon, all of the sudden becomes sensitive to light. Because there is that one moment, if you remember, where Johnny tells Robo something, and I forget the exact words, but Robo moves out of the way and you see the sun. And it hits Draculon, he's just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
frazzled. And then the whole fire
Oh
cross
yeah.
thing comes up. So yeah, I mean, is one of those things where, um, like you said, there are inconsistencies there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then too with the final weapon that uh, Giant Robo uses against uh, Draculon here, and you mentioned it too. This burning cross, which obviously it's the usual trope that they use against vampires, either fire, garlic, sunlight. Even though that they're being bathed in sunlight here in this episode, where basically the entire episode is being held in daylight, and then of course you get the cross, as always. And if Draculon is a space vampire like the original Japanese title uh, says, yeah, suggests,
Suggests.
you would think that maybe some of these uh, beings from a different planet or so would be at least resistant to particular things, even like the cross, because they might not even know if like the cross even existed in their civilization, or maybe on their planet that they had some kind of symbol that uses a cross or something of that matter. And you know, fire too. Yeah, there's just a lot of questions that you can dive into, and then of course you probably give me the timeout thing in that regard. So it's, yeah, there's just a lot of things to just really consider at this point with him being a space vampire. Like, yeah,
I like how you preempted my timeout
yeah,
there.
because I knew that probably would be
I
coming.
will say this though. Yeah, I will say this though. His daughter or assistant or whomever she actually is, she does a hell of a job of giving this non-blink 1,000-yard death glare.
Hmm.
Um, because we see it multiple times. We see it in the beginning when she goes after that unicorn agent, that generic unicorn agent, and then when Jerry and Johnny shows up, and then she goes from this so-called normal villager and transforms into her actual self, this vampire, and almost repeatedly says, "I want their blood. I
I
want that
want their
neck," and
blood.
she
I
just,
need
you
it.
know, yeah, yeah, she does a
Yeah.
good job. Um, it's sort of hokey, but at the same time, it is really good. I'll give her performance two thumbs up because she does a good job. I think she does fantastic in terms of really capturing that undead look and this obsession with needing sustenance and being focused on what she's
Hmm.
wanting.
Yeah. And then one thing that I like to at least point out was when both Johnny and Jerry were being chased down by the villagers there. Excuse me. And when they're uh, basically in this temple, being cornered in a way where the villagers were trying to claw their way in and everything. I noticed that the background uh, on the one side for the outside is this painted, I think this matte painted background of the trees. But then when Jerry goes out and tries to be a decoy and everything, you briefly see a bluish dark gray background for the outside part when he barges out from the front part of the temple. There's like it just feels like that they missed to put up a matte painting background for that particular front part when he barges out because it just looked totally fake. Like it, you at one point just didn't really feel like you were a part of that whole thing, or like it didn't look real enough. Like it just felt like they were in some sort of studio or like this museum type of relic, this temple relic, in a way of one of those replicas.
I just thought it was funny that he was trying to hold a moment with his jacket.
That and then going up and down the
And
stairs there.
just the fact that they didn't even try lunging. Those vampires should have had both Jerry and Johnny, but because the writers of this episode decided to make them more like zombies than vampires, that's the reason why Jerry and Johnny end up surviving that particular,
Hmm.
which again is unfortunate. Johnny didn't know. I mean, that is the reason why they wrote it in, um, to just be that goofy. Uh, I will say that I do like Draculon's or Dracula's
Hmm.
design, or his look when he enlarges himself to battle
Hmm.
Robo later. I do like that sort of medieval European style of clothing that he has, including that shield and that sword. I thought it was pretty cool, despite the fact that there's one point where he destroys this um, well or whatever it is. He just gets distracted
Yeah,
by this small man,
that's one thing that I
a decent enough opening to attack him, which
yeah, that's the one thing that I noticed too was that it just seemed like he was more focused on destroying the temple or some of the buildings around him instead of being focused on battling and defeating Giant Robo when he confronts him.
yeah, it's just it's really weird how that is. Yeah. Um, I'm ready to go into final thoughts, actually.
Go right ahead.
So while the episode brings in a really cool villain in Draculon and adds some elements of horror, the fact the writers played fast and loose with vampire rules and didn't entirely stick to themselves hurts this episode quite a bit. There was a lot of action, but even then it was downgraded by having the people who were turned into vampires behave like zombies. There was a lot here that would have been able to bring about one of the best episodes in the series, but instead we end up with a frustrating episode that doesn't make me want to laugh at it in of fun, but to frown and fold my arms due to so many inconsistencies within the story. It's still relatively fun, so it gets a few points, but otherwise it's frustrating. 4 out of 10.
Wow, I was sort of expecting at least something a little bit average. But at least with this
No.
episode, for me anyways, it's far better than the last episode that we talked about. Because at least with Dracula on here, he was more memorable in that regard. And thus, I can at least remember watching this episode and remember some of the things that went on with it. Otherwise, with some of the things that have gone on and some of the settings, yes, the settings look pretty good when it in that regard, but there are some at least some inconsistencies or maybe some whoopsies that happened as far as placement in some of the matte paintings where they probably should have added one for the front part where Jerry barged out and to act as a decoy while Johnny goes looking for the watch communicator that he accidentally dropped. But yeah, I do like the design of Draculon in this. Um, but as far as some of the behavior of the villagers and stuff that Kent has pointed out earlier, and now I just sort of realized that, yeah, there's just some inconsistencies when it comes to behavior of the villagers compared to at least his assistant or daughter or whatever. Um, but at least the story portion of this episode is far better. I think it at least focused more on the subject matter of what it was doing besides the previous episode. For me, in that regard, I would give this episode a 6 out of 10.
All right. So let's go to episode of Johnny Sokko and his flying robot, episode 26. The English title, The Last of Emperor Guillotine. The Japanese title, The Last Day of Guillotine. Jason, which one do you like or prefer the most?
But honestly, both of them are pretty good because, as far as the Japanese version, it basically tells us that this is the last episode of Johnny Sokko and his flying robot because it's obviously says the last day of Emperor Guillotine, and it's, you know what's going to happen. But it also is, at the same time, it sort of spoils it. Well, both of them actually. Um, and as far as the English one, the last of Emperor Guillotine, it's sort of good, but then at the same time, it's like, what do they mean by the last of for Emperor Guillotine? Like, is it his last day of ruling the earth?
Last call.
The the last bathroom break for Emperor Guillotine, or what? I don't know. In my in my opinion, I probably would go with the Japanese one barely on this one.
Yeah, by and large, the titles are the same. There's just a very small difference in wording. I do think the Japanese one is better. To me, there's something more absolute with its wording.
Mm-hmm.
So I would personally go with the Japanese one. All right, so here is a quick plot summary of episode 26. Guillotine is preparing for his final stand. He sends a sniper to kill Johnny, but the mission ends up failing due to the sniper's incompetence. Guillotine sends out some of the Kaiju from to confront Johnny and Robo. Triumphs. Unicorn battles remnants of Gargoyle. Guillotine grows large and battles Robo. Robo flies into space where it heads towards an incoming meteor where both Robo and Guillotine. The battle is now over. I thought it was funny once again that Unicorn somehow just sensed that Guillotine was going to make his final end pretty soon, as the narrator says, opening up the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it just felt like they just had some sort of sixth sense into knowing what was going to go down in that regard, which to me is sort of ridiculous in a way. I mean, when it comes to this series, what else? What else is surprising at all? So they just sort of went all in, and as well, you can say that this is sort of like the destroy all everything when it came to, seeing not only the Gargoyle game, but as well as Iganog and Scallion. I mean, you got Iganog for the second time coming in for the final episode here, and for some reason Scallion comes back alive and tries to destroy it. And then of course you get Optagon for one last time here.
I think there was some stock footage used in one scene. So, what was that about?
Nothing. It's just people upstairs just being dumb, pounding on the floor.
They were.
Yeah.
But anyways, what the hell were we talking about?
Scallion.
Oh, like Unicorn. Was it Scallion? I thought it was Unicorn.
Well, yeah.
I'm just gonna move on to a point here. Johnny talks about how he and Jerry got fooled when they're investigating this one barn. And I'm thinking to myself, they've been fooled.
I don't think it was really a barn. It looked more like one of those really old Japanese school buildings that was abandoned.
Regardless, this is one of the main premises of this entire series. As we've talked about numerous times, Unicorn comes off as incredibly incompetent and aloof. And, I kind of chuckled when Johnny said, "I've been fooled." And I'm going, dumbass, you've been fooled throughout most of the series.
Can't you not understand that?
I guess not.
But then, the one.
It's really goofy. By the way,
the one thing that was sort of surprising that as soon as Johnny and Jerry were about to leave this abandoned building here, they had one of the gargoyle assassins shoot Johnny in this one.
Shoot.
Yeah. Yes.
Quote unquote.
But then later.
Props to Toei though for actually doing that, even though it ended up being.
Yeah, because then in maybe about a few or so scenes later that Johnny was, 100% fine, and he tells uh, Marie or Mari that he talks to in this communicator that he had this sort of vest or whatever to protect him from this bullet. It's like, how would you even know? But, well, it would be sort of the.
It's just as bad as 2 episodes ago when we thought Robo was dissolving, but the real Robo was flying around and there was no real
Yeah.
setup
Mm-hmm.
for that.
Yeah.
And that sniper, by the way, is a terrible sniper. Because after he shoots Johnny and he believes he's killed him, Guillotine's saying, "Look, show me the body." Like, they're taking him to the hospital. You need to make sure this kid is dead. So basically, Guillotine's like, follow him to the hospital and put a bunch of lead into his body to make sure this kid is dead. And not only does he follow them to the hospital and thinks he shot Johnny multiple times, he doesn't pull down the covers, because initially when we see Johnny in the hospital, you see him covered up in a hospital bed. But when this sniper dude ends up going into Johnny's room, the covers are completely pulled up over, and he says something to the effect of, "Now I've got you, unicorn agent," or whatever, and shoots about. And then he goes out the window. He doesn't bother to quickly pull down to verify not only that it is Johnny, but to verify that if it is Johnny, that he's dead. And, this is a terrible sniper. This is one of the worst hitmen you could ever hire to do a job for you, because this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Hell, I am not a hitman. The only gun I've ever fired are BB guns. I've never fired a real gun. And I would know, look, you not only need to see the body, you need to make sure that you go in and you finish this thing, and you make sure that you finish it by looking at it and making sure that damn thing
Yeah.
bleeds. Sorry, but that's how it
Yeah,
goes.
and especially
So
if
how does John
the cover.
car to hop into?
Yeah, and especially if, when the assassin was going in and trying to finish the job off, that if you see the covers going over the entire body, including the head and everything, you'd be a little bit suspicious. It's like, is this person I'm trying to finish off, like, there, or is this a decoy?
Right.
But of course,
Exactly. I mean, this is the worst. This is the worst sniper ever. And I think it says more about Guillotine than it does the sniper, because this is who Guillotine found, and he bring the sniper saying, "Look, show me the body." He shouldn't have to tell whomever this individual is that, "Look, I need to see the body, and you need to make sure that this individual I'm having you go after is bleeding and is gone." Like, that's just how it goes. And to me, that says more about Guillotine than anything else. This Guillotine, may be pretty powerful, but at the same time, he's the worst judge, more times than not, of picking people to do the jobs for him. And I, have issue uh, with that. And it just really frustrates the hell out of me that we have to do this. Again, I understand it's a kid's show, but it's just something that bothers the hell out of me. And what makes it even worse, that's because this is the biggest problem I have with this. And my memory going into this final episode was that there was a bit of a struggle between Guillotine and Robo, but there wasn't much of one. And as I watched this episode this time, I was taken aback by really how almost of a non-existent fire was between Robo and Guillotine. There was a few, hand movements and stuff like that, but otherwise it was Robo dodging a few of Guillotine's, um, uh, uh, you know, punches or whatever you want to call them, and then he just grabs Guillotine, and then they go up and get blown up by the immediately that we see in 2 or 3 shots. Guillotine doesn't even put up a fight against Robo to try to get loose. He just sits there, in Robo's arms, and that's the end of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, it's just sort of like, even though that he hasn't really appeared in much of the episodes there, that it's just sort of cheesy a way for him to come back and then sort of having this sort of last hurrah to where he didn't really do much in that regards, besides just being uh, mainly giant towards the end, and then taking the planet for hostage, being the weapon himself, whereas just a tiny fragment of his fingernail that he takes off of himself and then throws it to demonstrate, and then causes this big explosion in that regard, and then having Giant Robo confronting him that way, and then kicking him and all that. You would think that Emperor Guillotine would explode right then and there no matter what, but obviously there's just a lot of questions that we can't ask because it's a kids episode, and thankfully Kent's not here to hear about it and trying to give me the timeout thing here. But yeah, it's just, it would have been a really good episode if they really planned this out pretty well. Yeah, it's just something that I just, even though it's still a good episode, I would say it's sort of on the same level compared to the previous episode. But yeah, I was just,
I'm sorry, repeat that.
I was just talking about how this episode, it should have been thought out a little bit more, with it being the final episode of the series. But at least it's, to me, it's sort of on the same ground level compared to the previous episode.
An underwhelming episode, to say the least, because Emperor Guillotine comes off as this big bad dude, and to a certain extent he does, because we see Guillotine take off a fingernail and he throws it and it blows up, and Guillotine ends up saying that, look, you cannot shoot me, the whole world is going to blow up, I'm basically made up of nuclear energy. And as a result, with
that was basically what I've just mentioned.
Yeah, and it just is disappointing. That is something that the writer should not have done, because Guillotine has built himself up over this 26 episode series as this big bad dude, and all he can do is basically say, don't shoot, I will blow up, and that's all he can do. And when he fights Robo, it clearly shows he can't even throw an actual punch. And this is one of the most underwhelming and disappointing battles I've ever seen, whether it's movies or in TV shows. And I've seen some terrible endings to shows. And this ranks up there with some of the worst that I have seen, because it just is. It's pitiful. We've been waiting for this moment for Guillotine to finally get into battle and take on Unicorn, more specifically Bo. He is the boob. He talks a big game, but he can't do a dance to really save his his life, and it bothers me. And speaking of bothers, like, are your neighbors still like pounding on the floor or something? Like,
They're just a bunch of a-holes, seriously, upstairs.
were they
It,
stomping on the floor?
yeah. they,
They
I don't know, they
got
just,
kids up there or something?
yeah, it's just constant every day, seriously.
Maybe you should go up there and like knock on the door and be like, "Hey, can you please like keep it down?"
Well, if I keep,
I had to do that with a neighbor before.
well, it just seems like even when I try to do that, they still keep on doing it. It's like they just have no regards.
You have you talked?
Yeah,
Have you talked to him?
yeah. Yeah,
Butthead.
they just have
But
they just have no
anyway,
respect
uh,
in that regard. But let's just keep going here.
yeah. Um, right at the end of the episode, the narrator comes in and basically saying like, if Johnny ever needs Robo again, maybe Robo will just kind of come flying out of the sky.
Yeah, in
And
pieces.
that to me again crossed the disbelief, because I'm going, look, we just saw this robot and Emperor Guillotine smash into an oncoming meteor and blow up.
Yeah.
Do you think Robo is just gonna magically come flying out of the sky again like he did a couple episodes ago? No, that thing is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really stupid thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the
So
only
it
way
was
he's gonna come back down is in pieces.
a bunch. It's like a meteor shower, but it's burning rope.
Yeah.
So do we want to go on a final thoughts and a rating?
Yeah, yeah. As far as this last episode, I was really expecting something, even though we get quite a bit of quite a bit of monsters in this last round here. But in the end, it just felt a bit disappointing because even with some of the battles against these three monsters, Optagon, Ignod, and Scallion, it just felt underwhelmed in a way. And as far as finally defeating the Gargoyle again, in this, it just also felt underwhelmed. Even the destruction of Emperor Guillotine in this, a lot of things just felt underwhelmed in that regard. And yeah, it's just they should have thought this episode a bit better to make it the best that they could do for this entire series to make it at least memorable in that. When it comes to the final episode, is it that memorable? I don't know. It's their
It's memorable,
yeah,
but for the wrong
yeah,
reasons.
and yeah, I really can't think of much as far as the story. To me, it's sort of in the middle, but like it's sort of had something going on, but then at the same time, it also sort of felt like episode 24 in a way where it just didn't really go much of anywhere besides ending the entire show, as well as this ending Emperor Guillotine right then and there, and it just, and then also they didn't bring back Vanguard, but I'm assuming the way when we last saw him, it just seemed like that he died right there, as well as oh, forget the other one, the other look-alike. And then Harlequin, we never get to see him again after maybe the early part of second half of this. discussion of Johnny Sokko. Yeah, there's just the entire theme of this entire show. It just seemed like there's been a lot of themes in our discussions, but the overall theme of this entire show is just inconsistency. Um, yeah, but it's yeah, yeah.
Save your overall
But
thoughts of
as
the show
far
here for a
as this
bit here, but
episode, for a rating out of 10, I would give it a 5 out of 10.
oh, okay. Um, it's surprising how sometimes final confrontations can be in movies. I've seen numerous movies where the final battle is so disappointing that it can nearly sour experiences with the entire film and potentially saga when applicable. My memories of this final episode were ones of knowing the final battle wasn't going to be much, but I have forgotten how not a final battle would be here. While it was nice to see a few for a few moments, it doesn't entirely make up for a few moments by Robo and Guillotine in their one and only face-to-face battle. I will say this though. I have seen enough shows where there is no conclusion to the story. They simply end. Grateful we got an ending to this series. Still, what we get for a battle between the quote-unquote mighty Emperor Guillotine and heavily armed Robo is nothing short of major disappointment. It's unfortunate that these final 3 episodes end the series on a low note, 3 out of
Wow.
10. So let's just kind of give our own final thoughts on this series as a whole. Who wants to go first here?
Well, as I was sort of going into the tangent of my final thoughts on Johnny Sokko and his flying robot overall, whereas as I mentioned that it felt like the overall theme for this show is just inconsistency in that regard. There's every episode, even though it just seemed like each episode are just contained within that one episode, but but there are some elements that keep on continuing as the show progresses on. But with that, with all those things, there's just a lot of inconsistencies per episode as the show progresses, and then like, was it Red Cobra? I thought it was Fangar at first, but then you have Fangar. They're just almost they. To me, it just seemed like that they were the same person, but probably one of them was the earlier iteration, which to me it felt like Red Cobra was more of an earlier iteration to Fangar in that regard, just with their appearance.
And we found out
Yeah.
that was true. And we don't get an absolute conclusion to Red Cobra, Fangar, or Harlequin.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get Harlequin, which he only comes into a few episodes here and there, but most of the time after his inaugural appearance or debut, he didn't really do much at all. And then maybe several episodes afterwards, you don't even really see him much again. Like whatever the hell happened to Harlequin after his initial disappearance. Like, wasn't there maybe supposed cut that was taken out where he initially died or whatever in one of these episodes, but I don't know, they must have forgotten, or yeah, it's just a real mystery. I think he's one of the only generals out of the many generals in this entire show where you don't even really know what ever happened to him at all. And at least with almost all of them, we do know what actually happened to them in that regard. Whereas when it came to Vanguard, I think the way how it ended, where he was trying to escape in that one episode, and then the entire base explodes. So I think he basically died right there. Um, and then obviously we saw Botnus uh, get eliminated by Emperor Guillotine there, and then we see some of these one and done generals get killed off in the end. But Harlequin, he's just on a whole other level, just vanquished from this entire show mysteriously without even knowing what happened.
So, like, overall, though, like, is this a show you would recommend? Like, is this something like what would you say to someone outside of what you just said who has maybe never seen it but is pissed about it?
I would at least say it's a good portion of the show is pretty entertaining for some of the goofiness, campiness that it delivers. But I would say outside of that part, there are some things that could at least disappoint you. Like some of the episodes, even the final three that we've discussed, and then some of the other ones that we've discussed in the past. But for me, if I were to uh, recommend it to people, I would say at least give it a go once, and then if you like it, uh, that's uh, that's your thing. And if you don't like it, you don't have to uh, have me talk about it ever again, and that sort of thing. Even if it comes up to the first half of it, um, or maybe a few episodes, and if they don't like it, then they don't like it at all. Or if they really enjoy it, then they can watch through it, and then they can sort of decide for themselves overall if this was a good show or like something that is sort of their guilty pleasure sort of TV show. Then yeah, um, for me, I would just at least say give it a go just this one time, so then I wouldn't have to keep bugging you ever again about it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say this. You know, we nitpick on this show, and part of that is because we feel like we have an obligation to people um, who are either just entering the tokusatsu and are trying to get sort of a general sense of where certain shows or movies lie, or people who are tokusatsu fans but maybe have not experienced um, things like Johnny Sokko and his flying robot, or insert particular movie title. We feel like it is our duty to try to be objective as possible when covering all this stuff. Despite the fact that we are both fans of this genre, we have to, on some level, be critical of this stuff to try to be objective. And I know, I think on some level that may turn some people off, but the thing is that, look, it can be level easy to have a rah type of podcast where everything you cover is great. But you know what happens with something like that after a while? You are not only given a bunch of bullshit because people aren't with you about any shortcomings of insert whatever it is you're talking about here, but on top of that, it becomes dull.
And then at times I think it would
And
be more or
um,
less like sort of a echo chamber, but you can sort of say that for both ends of the argument. But we try to at least be more in the middle as best as we could.
Yeah, and everything that we have ever covered, we've always given at least one or two criticisms of, including things that we absolutely love. You go, what was it, maybe a year and a half ago when we covered Monsters. One of my favorite Godzilla films of all time, and I think I had at least a couple of criticisms about that film. Have there been films at times in which we've absolutely despised? Of course. Shin Godzilla being the most obvious. But those types of movies come along really not that often. And the few films that we really are rah 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 shish boom ba about, like for me, the '98 Godzilla film or Invasion of Astro Monster or Mothra vs. Godzilla, those happen once in a great while too. Everything else, by and large, kind of hits the center more or less. And thing that I feel like we have an obligation to, if we want to create something that is not only informative but insightful to people, because I truly do believe podcasts like this are not only something where you celebrate something, but it's also something in which you learn something as well, especially for those people who are brand new into this sort of material, or people who have maybe been in it for a bit but may not be as familiar with certain other types of things that they have experienced up to this point in their fandom. So with that being said, if you rewind a number of years ago, you will hear me talking about Johnny Sokko and his flying robot, singing the praises of this show, bugging the heck out of Jason to get his copy of the show and to watch it, and all that. I still stand by all that. Despite the fact I have been pretty darn critical, including this particular show, about some of the episodes, I still stand by the fact that this is a show that anyone who is a fan of tokusatsu should see, because this, by and large, almost encapsulates everything that we love about this genre. It is about giant creatures slash giant robots fighting each other, weird humanoids, plots, and just all sorts of crazy shit. To put it all in a nutshell. And that's what this is. That's one of the main really the big reason why I love this show. Here's the thing. I would rather have a show or a movie that is knuckin' futz and makes almost no sense when you sit down to think about it, than to have a show or a movie that tries to make logical sense of everything but ends up being not that entertaining at all. Case in point is when we covered the Gold, that was within the last year and a half to 2 years we covered that
Which
film.
one was that again?
I even the Golden
Okay. Yeah,
Bag.
your audio just sort of cut out there for a second.
Despite the fact, and I remember saying this then when we covered it, this thing is just completely out of this world nuts. I am entertained by it. But if you sit down and you try to think about all the stuff, like how logical is this, or where's the plot going here, etc., none of it makes any damn sense. It would take a huge mess of us, negative 35 stars in a rating when you sit down and try to take it apart. For me, when it comes to entertainment, the first thing I look for is how entertained am I by the end of the show or the movie, whatever it may be. If I'm entertained, that will trump an awful lot of stuff. Sure, I will go on and criticize certain things. I will criticize maybe character development, I will criticize motivation, I will criticize plot, etc. Johnny Sokko and his flying robot falls in that category of it's a total mess of a series in terms of its writing, because there are a lot of inconsistencies. There are things that make absolutely no fucking sense when you sit down to think about it. But is it entertaining? My God, it is. It is completely entertaining. In this day and age, in not just reality, but even more specifically in the times of COVID, and the fact that we're seeing hundreds of thousands of our own people in this country dead. And the fact that people are losing their jobs and the fact that reality is just so depressing. I don't want to go into a movie or a show that is almost similar to what I'm experiencing on a day-to-day basis when I wake up every morning. I want my entertainment to take me to a place that makes me forget about that for X amount of minutes or hours. Johnny Sacco and his fine robot, being the completely nutso that is, helps it. Does, but by God, I am entertained by it after X amount of episodes that I watch. I still highly recommend this series. If you're someone coming in saying I'm a Godzilla or Gamera fan or both or whatever, and you're maybe looking for some TV shows to watch to kind of help fill that void a little bit, Johnny Sacco and his Flying Robot definitely is a show that will easily fill in that void. Don't when you watch it, because if you do, it will make you go insane. But if you just sit down and take it for what it is, you will walk away from it being entertained. And so my final thing is this: watch it, because you will be entertained, and I do believe a vast majority of you will enjoy it.
Well, for me, the one thing I should probably added into my argument when it comes to would I recommend this to anyone, is for those that are coming into like this whole Japanese culture, as far as like TV and movies, and as far as like if they're gonna come into the tokusatsu and the Godzilla and or kaiju genres for the very first time, would this be the first show to recommend them for? For me, I would say no, not yet. I would try to recommend them some of the best ones uh, out there that are available, and maybe I would maybe stick with them with the old school or the Showa Ultraman TV shows first, or uh, some of the other tokusatsu TV shows first, and then sort of gradually showing them some of these other TV shows. And I would say this one would probably be several lines down the road if they become like one of those like a diehard tokusatsu or kaiju fan in that regard as years go by. And like if this was something that they haven't really heard of, it's like, hey, you should see this. If to me, um, if you try to show them this and with all the inconsistencies, I mean, some of the shows like back in the day with kaiju and tokusatsu will have some inconsistencies, but at least with those, they have some really good story and battles compared to at least this one where it has some inconsistencies as far as what it was trying to do in some aspects of the show, and some things just aren't really just don't go anywhere. And there are some areas that are really good, but then sort of goes back down. It's sort of like the roller coaster sort of thing, and to me, it's just to try to get someone into something that you really like. It with that sort of thing, it wouldn't really put much of a good impression on something that you want your friend or family member or a stranger that you're trying to convince into getting into these genres. You would want to at least you want to show them the best ones first before they actually think, oh yeah, this genre I think I can really get into, or it's like, oh, this stuff is fucking shit or whatever. But yeah, um, yeah. To me, it's sort of something down the
Here's where
line.
I have a problem with. Here's where I have a problem with. By and large, you said sure it's entertaining, but it's shitty. That's kind of what I kind of got from you in terms of when you would talk to someone about this. What I would do, I've learned through not just experience, but just kind of thinking more as I've gotten older, where it's not really my place to say whether or not someone should see this first or wait after a certain period of time or whatever. Up to me and they ask me, should I watch Johnny Sokko and his flying robot? I would do two things. One of the things I would do is ask them, okay, what has been your history with the genre thus far? And also, what other experiences have you had within the science, kind of the science fiction genre? What movies and shows have you watched in the past, so I can get sort of an idea of what their experiences have been. The second thing I would ask them, um, or the second thing I would do, is I would just kind of give a very breezy synopsis of what the series is, what they should what they will expect out of this series. I'm going to tell them, look, you're going to be going into a series where there's a giant robot fighting giant monsters and the occasional giant machine. There are people who, there are villains who are weird humanoid looking things that are human and an alien or another monster or whatever. Some people have buck teeth, wearing prison uniforms and a red cape. There are giant out legs. And basically say, look, this is kind of what you're going to experience in general. And then ultimately let them decide for themselves as far as where this go. So that's what I would do with them, is just um, basically say that what's been your history with the tokusatsu genre? And a sub question of that is, what has been your history with science fiction movies and shows in general, like here in the United States? Just give me a quick taste of what you've seen before. And then after that, say, okay, since you told me that, this is what you're going to encounter with Johnny Sokko. And then after all that, if they were to still ask me, okay, yeah, but do you think, like, if they kept like, do you think I should still watch the series? Then based off of what they told me in terms of their history up to that point and their history with science fiction movies and shows in general, after that, then I would decide or tell them whether or not they should go to that point. Ultimately, I would say this. Eventually, yes, you should watch Johnny Sokko and his flying robot. But if they were to tell me, okay, my experience with the tokusatsu genre is limited, I've watched this and that, and if they also told me that their experience with science fiction genre in general, even with the West, and again, depending upon what they've seen, if they haven't seen enough wacky stuff here from the United States, I would say, okay, you may want to watch just a little bit. You may want to watch maybe more of the Godzilla and Gamera films potentially before you dive into this, and or to watch maybe something like Ultra Q and or the original Ultraman before you
And
dive
that
into
was
something like Johnny
basically
Sokko.
sort of the point where I was getting at, because for those that are trying to come into these sort of genres for the very first time, they may not know some of these wacky things that go on in some within these two genres. Because, like, to me, sometimes it can also depend on the person of what they like. They may like some of these things, or maybe not, but sometimes you sort of got to be in the middle. It's like, okay, so what do you like? Do you like the campiness, or some more of the serious stuff? And that's sort of the one thing's like, maybe just sort of hold off on Johnny Sokko, maybe some of the other series, non, or I would say the non-familiar series, until they sort of get themselves familiar with the more well-known properties within the genre, whether it's Godzilla, Gamera, or Ultraman, maybe Kamen Rider, um, in that regard. So that's one of the things that I was sort of trying to get at with the previous argument I was trying to make.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just worded it that really I took a little bit of issue with. But yeah, ultimately, look, yes, I think if you come into the tokusatsu genre and it ends up being something that you like, if you don't come in and watch it with you're not this isn't going to be the first thing obviously you watch because that's just how it is. People are going to gravitate towards probably Godzilla first for
Hmm.
obvious reasons. But ultimately, yes, this is a series you should watch. It is knuck and futz, but it is very entertaining. It sort of fulfills that giant monster slash tokusatsu goodness that all of us like, you know. And I mean, look, when we've covered the Godzilla series, you know, um, I said periodically, look, not really a bunch of this stuff within the Godzilla franchise makes no sense. Some makes even less sense than others, and that's just sort of how it is. But I think with that, we're ready to end this particular podcast. By the way, quick housekeeping thing. When do we want to do our final year-end episode?
Let me quickly bring up my calendar here because I know at one point we sort of discussed the
Mm-hmm.
26th, and just from what I'm looking at my
Mm-hmm.
calendar right now, um, that seems to at least be one of the more logical ones. But I could at least also say the 27th, unless if you have anything going on that day. But um, but as far as that week of Christmas, I know Friday we will have Christmas Day, but obviously you probably wouldn't want to do that anyways. Um, and as
No.
far as Christmas Eve, I know we don't typically get that off. There have been some years at my work that we do get that, and then there were at times where we didn't. So um, so I haven't actually heard anything official if we're gonna get that Christmas Eve day off or not, up until maybe till that very week. So for me, 26th or the 27th would work best for me at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm gonna have company over, regardless of whether it's the 26th or 27th. Definitely not doing a Christmas Day or even Christmas Eve. Um,
And then obvious
I have
and
a
then
couple of
obviously
things that.
there's I would well I think I should I think we do get New Year's Day off, which New Year's Day is a Friday.
Yeah, do you said New Year's Day would work or New Year's Eve?
I would at least say New Year's Day, but maybe New Year's Eve too. We would obviously would have to do it later in the night.
Oh
But yeah, I
boy.
would at
Um,
least maybe say the best one would be New Year's Day, but it would be obviously in a New
it's
Year's.
not a year-end
Yeah.
episode.
So 26th or 27th would obviously be best for both of us.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because I'm having company over regardless, and my company, I don't think they're saying they're going to leave either Monday or Tuesday, and it's very likely they're not going to know until they're here and they kind of get an idea of what they want to do. Part of it, I'm sure, is going to be dependent on the weather as well. Um, that is tough. I have a couple of things that I want to write up. One is going to require some deep research, followed by some writing. Um, and I've got half of my notes done. It's just that the other half is going to take a bit of time. And one thing particular is going to take even more time than the other. Boy, that's kind of tough. I would say let's do it the 27th. That just in case that I'm gonna try to get everything done before, even before Christmas Eve comes along. But in case I need some extra time just to write things up, I have that extra day. So yeah, let's push for the 27th, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Grand Poobah Dai Kaiju Network podcast of this very shitty year of our Lord
Well,
2020, and hopefully go out with a
well, it
bang.
was basic. Well, with us having our 10-year anniversary this year, it sort of ended up being a shitty 10-year anniversary for us. It could.
There's been a silver lining in some of this stuff,
I
but
would
by and
say
large, it's been a dumpster fire.
the biggest headline that we had so far for our anniversary was by far the Daikaiju Fest that we had this past July in place of G Fest there. But obviously, uh, from our streams that we've done this past year, you've obviously seen the 10-year anniversary logo and all that coming this next episode. Things are going to be a little bit different. We're going to try to get all the anniversary graphics and stuff kind of reverted back to the regular stuff after when we get done here, and then as well as try to get stuff set up on my PC here with with using the new streaming program and all that. I'm going to talk with Kent here after the episode, kind of get some more discussions and some more tests. And before we do that, we were thinking about doing that the new streaming program today, but I wasn't quite unsure since we haven't really done much tests except for once. But so yeah, with that, just wanted to point out again as far as our streaming networks here, our audio podcast network. So you can find us over at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and TuneIn. And our streaming networks, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook Live, Periscope, and DLive. And you can like and subscribe to us on these following social media networks. Just search for Daikaiju Network. And we've got our own website, which the homepage will soon be overhauled with a brand new one that'll be a little bit more interactive. You can find us at our own website over at daikaijunetwork.com. So yeah, be on the lookout or look forward to the year-end Kaiju extravaganza here on December 27th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you don't have anything else, we can end this amazing episode that we did, concluding Johnny Sokko and his flying robot.
Hopefully everybody stays safe. You have a happy, healthy Christmas, Hanukkah, etc., whatever it is you may celebrate. Also, this is something that Jason and I will discuss a bit further, but going into the new year, we intend on doing commentaries for a bit. We're not exactly sure how long, and then after that, we intend on potentially starting up TokuZone again by covering another show. So we will flesh more of that out when we get ready to podcast here in the next couple of weeks, and then even more so as we enter 2021.
Yeah, we'll also.
So with that, thank you so much for listening and or watching. And we will see you here
All right.
in a few weeks.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks.